So welcome everybody, no mai haere mai, to this new season of the NDF online sessions. Kia ora, ko Teina Hers Toku Ingoa. I'm the kai whakahaere mātua of National Digital Forum, which is the Executive Director of National Digital Forum, or NDF as we like to call ourselves these days. Today we are very, very pleased to have joining us Victoria Passau from Tāmaki, Paenga, Hira, the Auckland Museum, and we are going to be talking unlocking the power of digital volunteers. Before we hand over to Victoria and before I introduce her more formally, just a few housekeeping notes. So just to keep the session running smoothly, we will ask that you keep yourself muted, and because this is a lunchtime session, please keep the cameras off so we don't have to watch you eat. Also, it keeps the focus on our lovely speaker. This session is being recorded. And a lot of people will be given the link, including yourselves, but a lot of people will be watching this in their own time later on. We will send this out in an email and along with any links or resources that have been mentioned in the webinar. So your questions and comments are most welcome. Please use the chat function down the bottom there and post your questions in chat at any time. At the end of the session, at the end of Victoria's presentation, we will, if we have time, we'll go through those. And yeah, we would love to hear your comments and any questions. Okay, so first of all, welcome to Victoria. As I mentioned, she is from Tāmaki, Paenga, Hira, where she is running the Online Cenotaph, an incredible digital platform. And she commands a small army of digital volunteers to bring this incredible platform to life. Victoria is also the the head of the museum's research library and provides access to the museum's remarkable documentary heritage collection. I'm going to hand over to VP now to let her take us through.
Kia ora koutou. I'm just going to share my screen, so hold on one moment. Hopefully everybody can see that. Yes, and there's no screen on top of a screen. Are we all good? I cannot see you. So this is going to be fun. Taina, is this going all well?
This is going perfectly well. You're doing
incredible. So kia ora tātou, noai rani me ingarangi hoki o kui tūpuna I whānau mai au ki whangare I te puaki au I Tāmaki Makaurau he tangata tiriti ahau ko Victoria Passau tōku ingoa kei Tāmaki Paenga Hira ahau e mahi ana he kai whakahaere Online Cenotaph me te pātaka matapuna ahau. Ko tēnei taku mihi ki ngā tangata whenua o te rohi nei, ka mihi hoki o ki ngā tohu o te rohi nei. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora everybody, it's really great to not be able to see you, but kia ora, thank you very much for inviting me along to this, the start of the new season. And today we'll be speaking about unlocking the power of digital volunteers. I've got quite a lot to get through. So I'm going to provide a very brief introduction to Online Cenotaph, talk about the tools and platforms that we use for digital volunteering at the museum, types of mahi that is done, communication strategies to make sure people feel engaged and valued, the challenges, some of the challenges that we face, top tips, and why volunteering matters. So here we go. So Online Cenotaph was established in 1996 as a role of honour. And over the last 29 years, it has developed into being a really integral military resource for New Zealand service personnel and researching from the 19th century up until today. There's about 267,000 records. It's a purely digital collection. And so we rely on transcription of information from many varied sources, from embarkation rolls, so the names and the units that people served under, as well as personal remembrances, diaries, and other documentation. So a lot of our work is paper-based and transforming those into digital records. So this is what Online Cenotaph, oh, it's looking a little bit, look, I learned how to do this on my phone and it hasn't quite worked. But this is what Online Cenotaph looks like. If you could see that, each of the records has lots of textual information in it, and all of that would have been typed out by a human being. So I'll move on from that funny little video slide. It did work on my computer. And so in 2020, the museum was lucky enough to enable one of my former staff members, Dan Miller, to move down to Wellington. And he, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, must have known that the COVID period was going to happen, and it meant that he was able to spend 18 months photographing archive files from Archives New Zealand, and we worked with them in conjunction with them to be able to image about 30,000 pages from their open access collections. And the slide reflects the work that was done during the COVID transcription period. And this is a sort of project that kicked off all of this work. And during the many lockdowns that Auckland had, we had 14 visitor hosts, and I think it was up to 17 volunteers at one time transcribing all of these different records and files. This also include material from our documentary heritage collection, as well as resources that had been provided by the community and our community of researchers over the years that we just hadn't got to. I managed two collection technicians, so we just did not have the time to transcribe that material ourselves. In the past, we'd also been really lucky to receive funding to transcribe material. So the 16 volumes of the World War II Army embarkation rolls, nominal rolls, were transcribed professionally. But I think we all understand that in today's current climate, it's not likely that we would be able to get as much funding for that sort of work. So we were able to give a number of people really valuable work during those lockdowns, which I think really kickstarted this whole project. And these are just big dumb numbers. I thought I'd just put some stats up about how much this has impacted our work. So we transcribe and focus on transcribing lists of names, units, ranks, all the things that need to create a record or can enrich a record. We don't transcribe diaries. We, as part of this work or big narrative works, we focus on enriching the records to sort of reflect what units they may have served in, or what conflict or what prisoner of war camps they were in. So these stats show how much in the last 4 or 5 years that we've been able to update because of all of this transcription work. So it's sort of, I thought this was a good thing to start with, just sort of see the value of it from numbers and maths. So some of the tools and platforms that we use for digital volunteers is Zooniverse, From the Page, and Google Drive. So I will cover off the Zooniverse and From the Page projects pretty quickly, because Zooniverse was a really useful platform for us to utilize during the COVID lockdowns. It gave some of our staff and the collection information and access team a really good experience of being able to use those platforms, and then get our volunteers stuck into transcribing this material. And it was really effective. Like in some days, people were transcribing 200 things a day, which was really, it meant that we got through a lot of work. But it sort of has an administrative burden that you sort of need to have a bit of technical nous, and it takes a lot of admin to get those projects up. And I think it would be effective for other projects, but for the number of projects and the length of the, where it might be only between 10 pages or 100 pages, of putting that amount of effort in sort of became a little bit, so we just sort of questioned whether that was actually going to be sustainable. So the Zooniverse project was for the Hall of Memories, naming or finishing off that list. And then we also use From the Page, which is a subscription service. And sorry, I should have said Zooniverse is free, and it's mainly a citizen science-based platform. From the Page is you do pay subscription, and we use it for transcribing our publications out of copyright publications from the Bioheritage Diversity Library work, but also from these volumes of the New Zealand biographies of deceased personnel from the RNZAF. from World War II, and because they were quite narrative, it made it pretty straightforward that those pages could be transcribed, because I think it's about 12,000 pages, so you've got a big chunk of information, and they're almost virtually completed, which is pretty amazing. But if I was to be incredibly honest, we use cloud platforms that are generally part of your work life. So we started off Google Drive. The museum didn't have a cloud-based platform for file sharing when we started in COVID. So that's why we've utilized Google Drive and not SharePoint. And it is, we have a find for our volunteers who have continued on after the COVID period. That is the most simple platform that we use. So we put Google Sheets within there and upload the images that we're wanting to for them to transcribe, and we break up the information into really easy chunks. So I talked to Steve, who's in our IT digital team, and he told me that about that there are non-profit packages for some of these. So it means that if you're in a charity like we are, there are discounted or free plans that you can use to do this. So managing volunteers, I'm just going to check my notes. We use Google Drive primarily to manage this information, and then that's downloaded into our servers just so that there's backup. Google is you need to ensure that you back up your information, and it is under the museum's overarching umbrella Google account. So then there is a slightly more backup system for that. And once the files are transcribed, as I say, we always download it, and we split up all the information into the information that we require for putting into Online Cenotaph. So it needs to work for you when you're transcribing. Sometimes volunteers will say, oh, that's too many keystrokes, or I don't want to add a full stop. You need to really create a structure, and for them to understand that that information will support us when we input it into the system, and that we never create make work for our volunteers. We try and ensure that all that information will be able to be put back into the system. So if you're able to explain that clearly, then people understand that, yes, it might take more keystrokes, but it will benefit me in the long run when I have to put it back into the system. So these screenshots are just an example of the way that we manage all the management of all the files that we've transcribed over the years. As I say, there's been probably more than 200 projects that we have managed throughout this time. Sometimes it's one photo of a memorial site, or it could be thousands and thousands and thousands of like merchant navy cards. So there's a real range of the data that we've transcribed. And so here's some examples. And oftentimes people will say, oh, you could use OCR or AI to transcribe these. We've found that sometimes that's effective if it's in a really solid table, but oftentimes the quality of the scan isn't great because Dan took a lot of photos on his phone. And that was the technology that we had available to us, and that was the most effective way that he just transferred those into our servers, and then we could upload them into Google Drive. And so, I say this to say is that don't try and overcomplicate things. Make it really simple. We're not the holders of those collections. We don't need to archive that material. We are just trying to get the text out of the resource. And as you can see, there's pages that are beautifully scanned, and then there's others that are slightly blurry because Dan just was working at pace. And then there's also, of course, the beautiful handwriting from throughout the ages as well. We also, I said this the other day, that I think this was probably the meanest a transcription project that I ever gave anyone. And this is a tablecloth that was embroidered with about 500 signatures from American and New Zealand service people during World War II. And I think we've been able to identify about 150 New Zealand service people. So we are quite, we have a broad sense of what transcription and the value of transcription is. It doesn't have to be documentary heritage. It can also be incredible other, human history or other material as well. This is probably one of the most highly involved projects that we've worked on, which is the Chronicles of the New Zealand Expeditionary Force, where there were 61 issues of this title, where they listed all of the hospital reports where people would visit them as part of the New Zealand War Contingent Association. And we have continued a transcription project that was part of Te Arawhata Le Quinoa's museum to see and verify whether people served in a specific battle during World War I. And yes, as you can see, there's 62,000 entries. So it's a lot of information and a lot of data that I think will be really interesting to see in terms of the care provided to wounded, sick, and those who subsequently died as a result of their wounds. And this is the outcome of a lot of this transcription, which is a transcribed file of the J-Force files, and this filled in about 4,000 personnel that had previously been missing from the J-Force document and records. And this was transcribed by Liz Wilkinson, who did a stand-up job, and then also beautifully matched them to Online Cenotaph, because in the past I would do that, but now we have people who are happy to match it against Online Cenotaph, because most of these people served in World War II and then were sent on the way home to serve in Japan. And so this is just an example of one of the transcribed outputs. So at the museum, I look after a group of about 10 to 15 volunteers. There's a group of who work in Paenga, so I have in-person volunteers as well as people who work online. Their volunteer time is managed by Ros Curry and her team, who look after the volunteers and all the documentation, and as well as their time, what is it like? The time fly account, so that the hours that they do are documented using a system, but I don't do that part. However, there is a really important thing, is that they do sign a volunteer code of conduct. So all the volunteers, whether they're on site or online, commit to upholding the volunteer code of conduct, and it's very similar to what staff sign in terms of intellectual property and all the material. Really, you're sharing your time so that we can utilize that material in our work. And so I think that's quite important, that if you're thinking of doing this, that you would need to have a very similar document, that people are very clear on what their purpose is and why they're doing it. So one of the questions I know that Holly and Taina were interested in is how we communicate with our volunteers. And I think you can probably tell that the way that we do it is we really try and keep it really simple. We use clear instructions and we use simple tools. And so I have my team and past staff who will likely manage one-on-one our volunteers. So we have about 8 or 9 people providing digital volunteering at the moment, and some who will be doing other projects or other volunteering situations, so they won't be doing it all the time. But we just keep it really straightforward, that people know who to contact. And I really think a really key thing, which is not necessarily like explicit communication, but actually utilizing the information in the database, in the work that you're doing. Don't make people do work that you are not going to utilize. It's like totally, I mean, that sounds straightforward, but I would be annoyed if I did a lot of work and then it wasn't put into the system. and people know that the amount of data, which I'll talk about the challenges later, is significant, but it will go into Cenotaph. So we acknowledge the efforts of our volunteers through providing regular updates and feedback, and you need to be organised and track progress, and you want to keep people engaged, and so you need to be timely. All those things that is around managing, good stakeholder or interpersonal relationship management is be clear, be accurate, and be timely. So this is just some examples. I'm sure they love it, but they get regular updates from me where I talk about, like I've talked about the presentation today, or blogs that we've written, or stories that we've been told by contributors or people who we work with. And then also we do a year in review, and we also that highlights the work of our volunteers so they can see that they are valued, as well as we will write specific blogs about some projects that are that warrant more exploration. So we did one around the influenza pandemic, a list that one of our volunteers transcribed and then identified about 500 people who were got influenza during that time or died of influenza, and we were able to update our records using that information, which was pretty cool. So there are some challenges, and the major one is that I've probably got data for years for me to upload into Online Cenotaph, and I think we've created a really good relationship with our volunteers, and sometimes, especially from my very good mate, Marguerite, she's like, I am itching to transcribe some more material. So sometimes finding more material can be a little bit difficult, but we are always searching out lists, and it doesn't have to be from our collections, but anything that's openly accessible, we will try and source and identify as being appropriate to add into Online Cenotaph. And again, keeping people engaged. Some people will enjoy transcription for a little bit and then drop off and then maybe not tell us, and that's totally fine. So we just have to keep on touching base with people. We're never offended if people say, look, I just don't find this interesting, or I don't want to transcribe this anymore. You're just like, that's cool. We just go pop that in our spreadsheet, and then we assign to somebody else who's really interested, because all of this is done in a voluntary capacity. This is we absolutely value the time, effort, energy, commitment that people are providing us free. When people go, oh, I'm going on holiday, it's like, excellent. We want you to go and enjoy your life. What you're doing is providing the cherry on the top work that is absolutely making a significant impact. But you don't have to do it if you're not enjoying it or if you need a holiday. We're not forcing people to transcribe for us. The other thing, which I don't know if it's a challenge, but it's sort of things that we've learned, is the unsustainable projects beyond COVID. Things like, for us, Zooniverse, it wasn't going to be something that I was wanting to engage with, to learn, to figure out how to pull that information out. I'm not saying it's too difficult, but I found a process that works well for us. And I think, yeah, going back to that, don't make people do work if it doesn't have a purpose. I think that's really key. You've got to respect people's time. They're providing it freely, but that is really important to make people feel valued, is that you're not making them do things that will not ever see the light of day. So top tips for overall success is, as I've said about 1,000 times, keep it simple, prioritize impactful material. So for Online Cenotaph, our records relate to people, and their military status. So when Dan identified lists, and this is the process that we do it now, is that we identify lists that have enough information for us to enrich Online Cenotaph through their names, variations of names, their rank, their unit, their promotions, and other information that the public will find really interesting. So that location, that's conflicts. And then you split up that information into this individual sort of columns that will relate to the data set. For us, transcribing diaries aren't as significant, or personal diaries, is because firstly, people can upload diaries to Online Cenotaph directly. And secondly, oftentimes the narratives around 1 or 2 people. So we sort of want to be able to, or 50, which is significant and important, but we're trying to fill the gaps in our collection around people's service, and that narrative material can come through different ways and different ways of enrichment. And we don't really have currently a way of surfacing those sort of large text format transcription projects. The other thing is, as I've said, acknowledge efforts. Always know that the people could be doing something else. And so when people are gifting their time and their interest, then you need to make sure that you show them that they're valued and their work is important and significant to the success of the project. You need to be organized. Nobody wants somebody to sort of like drop off the face of the earth when we're asking them to help us. And these tips are for looking after any volunteer, whether it's on site or online. And then, as I said 1,000 times, avoid make work. Don't do something if it's not going to be utilized. And yes, I think that's probably it. So the final slide is around why volunteering matters. And it is, I asked, it was really cool. Doing this at Saint Tana and Holly, that being asked to do this talk helped me really reflect on the amount of work that our volunteers do to support us, and being able to actually ask them. It sounds crazy, but I've never actually asked them why they do it in a really formal way. So I asked them a few questions, and for some of our volunteers, they love volunteering on site and at home. So, for example, Marguerite enjoys transcribing some of our minute books or other documentary heritage material and material in our museum archives with another team. And then also, so she does that on site, and then also going home and being able to transcribe at home, where she, in the comfort of her own home with her cat, and have a really nice time. And so there's sort of like that dual volunteering on site and online. While Kate, who lives rurally, this is the way that she can contribute to our project and to Online Cenotaph, as well as she worked on the Kenwa Te Arawhata Museum project as well. And so it's convenient for her. It means that she feels like she's contributing, even if she's not able to physically come into the museum. And that's another quote from Liz. So it not only matters to Online Cenotaph in terms of a data set, but it also gives a lot of joy to our volunteers, who feel a real sense of achievement. And I think that, the combination of all of those things means that it makes it a really fulfilling project for us to be able to enable and to work collaboratively with our volunteers. It's because it makes everyone happy that we can get information described, and then our volunteers feel like they're contributing to the wider understanding of New Zealand's military history. And that is the end of my chat. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That's it's so impressive, the work that you guys have done, and yeah, I think the value to New Zealand is immeasurable, really. And it's so nice to see that those volunteers have played such a big role. Yeah, we haven't had any questions in the chat just yet, but please feel free to put them in. We do have time We have had a question come through in sign up, and that was, I'll just scroll down. So from Robin, who is the Senior Advisor from Student Engagement and Employability at Victoria University. Their question for you is, would you consider using students as part of your volunteer network?
I mean, I don't manage the recruitment of volunteers, but I know that you can fill in a form, and if you're over 18, then that you'll be assessed by, whether your skills and interests are needed at the museum, and then they could definitely, be interviewed to transcribe or volunteer. So yes, totally.
Fantastic. And so you mentioned the importance of recognition and acknowledgement of the work that they do. And I think that must be particularly important in the case of digital when you're dealing with remote teams. So how are some of the ways that you do recognise, do you have any examples of how you have sort of recognised the community contributions in a way that, has really strengthened their commitment?
Yeah, so there's two things that we have. So we have a group of volunteers who sign up to be volunteers with the museum. So all the people, I should have probably said that, all the people who transcribe for us sign that documentation. But then we also have volunteers who work from home, adding information directly into the Cenotaph record. So it's a little bit different. So for us, recognition, we currently recognise the work of the volunteers who have a formal relationship with the museum as a volunteer. Mainly it's around the email signups, email newsletters that we send out, and also we don't do this regularly enough, but afternoon teas that we have people coming in if they can and they Zoom in, and also at the end of the year the volunteer team acknowledge people's work, and we can nominate people to be acknowledged as well. But I think in the future, if Online Cenotaph was to be redeveloped, maybe there would be a way of being able to better acknowledge the public user contributions in a different way, but I don't really know how that would happen at the moment.
Okay. Lots of thank yous coming through on the chat. Hayley says, thank you. I'm about to take on a digital volunteer. So this was very timely and helpful.
Nice.
We've got a question here from Louisa. She is asking, have you ever had any participants in an intern or formal training capacity working on these projects?
Not per se on this project. We have summer student cohort that happens every year, and we have had I had one which was around prisoner of war camps. Not a particularly uplifting story, but it was around creating data, and he did transcribe information. So yes, we have, but it wasn't seen as a transcription project. It was a research project. But it was a really great way of doing something that we couldn't have done without their input and their research. So yes, we do that, but it's normally sort of put during the summer period because it's a lot of work to look after them.
Yeah, imagine. Gareth has asked, is there any cross-checking or spot checking done to make sure that the transaction's accurate? And if so, how is this done?
Yeah, so we get the volunteers to quality control each other's work.
Nice.
The look and so I shouldn't call it that. It's the hospital notes from the chronicles. Other people go through, they've transcribed the material, and then we get people to actually then match it against Cenotaph, and that highlights if there's any transcription errors. There will always be. All of this is 100 years, 120 years old. There's no expectation this is going to be correct. The information isn't, I'm selective of what the information is put back into the system, and then I have to then do a check to match it against Cenotaph again, because people, it's human nature that things will be wrong. And yes, we cross-check as we go. Doesn't mean there's not duplicates on there. This is not a perfect thing, but
No.
that's
No. How do you sort of create a sense of community when can you create a sense of community amongst your volunteers, especially because they're remote and I know some of them are scattered around the world?
It was interesting because I said, are there any challenges? And really most people were like, no, it's just a message away or an email away, or somebody said, my cat's sitting on my laptop. So most people find it, the individuals who are drawn to this sort of work enjoy working on their own. So you're not going to get somebody who's wanting to have a social time. That's where you would do in-person volunteering. So most people understand that, we've had some of our volunteers for like 4 or 5 years doing this transcription work. So they're obviously interested, while other people who may have done it during COVID, but now they can go out in the world, they're not likely to continue on. So creating a sense of community, it doesn't seem so difficult because they're enjoying what they're doing as individuals. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you find they have little, like, is there a social, I mean, I would have said Twitter back in the day, now X, but are there little clusters of where digital volunteers gather? And
don't know, to be really honest. Most of our crew are probably not on the socials as much as other. So I think this is their zone out time. This is their sort of relaxing, watching some TV, doing some transcription sort of work. So it's not right. I don't think that's really their their motivation. But when they are volunteering on site, they'll see each other. But our remote vols, I don't know if they would. I haven't asked them, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. So when you're dealing with these volunteers, they're obviously working across the content in a really in-depth kind of way. And maybe you've got some volunteers as well that are working within the systems and the platforms themselves. I don't know, but do the volunteers ever throw up interesting feedback or that might shape the development of something like Online Cenotaph platform in the future? Or is there a sort of a feedback loop?
Yeah, there's definitely like technical requirements that I'm sure that would be that have been raised about how we should do things, and which is totally fair and valid. And so they sort of end up being sort of a really good group of guinea pigs that we can talk to, and will be when we come to redeveloping the website, they will definitely be one of the core groups of people that we can engage with. Most of the time they'll bring up, but don't ask me off the top of my head, but really interesting stories of people's service. And I think that's the part where they really help to influence the content that we might write or highlight in our Cenotaph stories. So they'll be so far in the data that they'll be like, this person, embarked 65 times, and so did his brother. And there's all these different links that can be made. And I think that's where they sort of give the feedback on the stories of the people that they are working. And it brings us back into focus that this isn't data, this is people's lives. These are people who have stories, and that's really where they end up focusing on.
So the main way you attract volunteers, is it through the website, or is it through relationships? Or
and through relationships. So some projects have I've inherited projects, and so that meant that we onboarded people into the museum's volunteer pool, and then others are through friends of volunteers who are interested and who will come along, or people who just want to volunteer and search Auckland Museum volunteer, and then they'll come through, and Ros will go, oh, we've got a good person here who's offering to work, or who has a military background or is interested in history and would like to contribute.
So if anyone is interested, then they should hit up aucklandmuseum.com.
Yes, lovely.
Yes. I believe it's is it Get Involved? I think it is.
You might be right. You probably
I think it's your museum or our museum, and then I think it's Get Involved. So yeah,
I just use Google.
We use Google, yeah. Fantastic. Well, there's more thank yous coming through I just had one more question, which was, so you've obviously talked a lot about Online Cenotaph and transcription. Are there any other areas within Auckland Museum and the collections online, etc., where you're using where you're using these remote volunteers and they've made a big difference?
I think in smaller pockets, so like in the documentary heritage and museum archives world, there is a transcription happening with describing correspondence, letter books, minute books, which absolutely support the access to those collections, which oftentimes will be a file that says correspondence A to AM, and you need to be able to figure out who's in being what letters are being written to people. And then also James, who's in my team, does a lot in the Wikipedia space. And so there are people who contribute in that way to supporting and enriching Wikipedia, utilizing our collections and our open access collections as well. So yeah, there are, but most volunteers will be on site and physically supporting people who are looking after physical collections or taking tours and all that sort of thing. So digital volunteering is not a major part of the hundreds of volunteers that provide service to the museum, but it is integral to Online Cenotaph.
All right, last question from me. I said that was going to be it, but I actually thought of one more, and that is future plans. Like, what's happening with Online Cenotaph, and you know, is there a big update coming, or small updates, or?
If anyone wants to just chuck me some money, that would be great. We're in the marinating thinking phase and in the planning phase for a redevelopment, because Online Cenotaph will be 10 years next year from the redevelopment during the World War 100 period. So there's definitely things that we can do to shift the platform along. We are just trying to figure out the best way of doing that. And yes, and we will be coming out and asking people to help us sort of think of what the next iteration will be, I'm sure.
Amazing. So any philanthropists out there with deep pockets, ultra high wealth individuals,
yes. Specific to, donate and just say specifically to Online Cenotaph redevelopment, that would be great. Don't, be specific.
Specifically, yeah. Okay, there's a bunch of links that have just been dropped in the chat. As I said before, these will be sent to you as well in the email with the link to the recording. We could probably, any last comments, Victoria, or?
No, but people are welcome to contact me if they want to ask me any questions. I'm happy to, because I see this as having value for lots of different projects, especially around maybe enriching in the Wikipedia space and in other ways that you may not think will be of interest. But but I think being specific and knowing what the purpose of the project is the key thing, so that people understand what the vision is and then they can really jump on board.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
It's been really great and super useful. We hope to have you back, and thank you everyone for
I love to yap.
Yeah, totally. Excellent. Good. We'll set you up for a few more sessions. Thank you everyone for joining us during your lunchtime today. Keep an eye out at ndf.org.nz, or make sure you're signed up to the newsletter so that you hear about our online sessions that we have coming up. And of course, NDF 25, don't forget about that, the conference that's happening in May 2025. And we are about to make some exciting keynote speaker announcements. And we are not too far away from releasing our early bird tickets. So yeah, we look forward to some very exciting news there. Thank you very much, everybody. Ka kite.